Okay, it's time to get back on this project. Someone just left a comment of whether I had got back to this or not, and I was like, yeah, I better finish that, because I start projects and then I get swept up in some other project or something that's maybe a little bit more timely. I just keep putting it off, but I don't use this at all because I just hate this handle, and I of course haven't thinned it down because I wanted to do that in this video. So actually what we're going to do first though is we're going to take this head off. And just a quick recap, you can watch the previous video was basically talking just about this handle and all the things I'm going to do to it. So it's too fat overall for me, period. It's an inch thick in the center here. It's wider than I want it. It's fatter than I want it. Up here it's just strangely absurdly thick, to the point where whether you think it's stronger or not, it just actually is hard to use because I can't even close my hand around it. I'm going to also take off this leading edge right here because it swells up and I just want to make it even straighter than it is, since I want to narrow it down this way anyway. This is a sharp edge and the head should be seated much further onto this. I'm going to seat it at least probably about another 1/2 to 3/4 of an inch down. And what else? Well, that's enough for now. There's about 1/8 of an inch sticking out right here of the handle. And if I can get another 1/8 of an inch or even 1/4 inch, then that'll give me a good amount of material here that I can just cut off to get to this metal wedge here and try to get it out. So I want to jump the head further down the handle. Now normally you just do that by hitting this, but the problem is that these ears have bottomed out. So you see how the wood slopes like this? Well, the ears hit first and they bottomed out on this wood, and so they won't go on any further. So I'm just going to go ahead and remove some wood right here in order to get this on about another 1/4 of an inch, and then we can try to get this handle off. Okay, so the first order of business to do that is there's a small bevel here. It's about 1/8 of an inch, maybe 3/16, and I want this to be stronger. And that's because if there were no bevel at all and I tried to pound this even with a wooden mallet, which is much safer than pounding it with steel, I would almost for sure chip off pieces of wood. The more there is a bevel here, like a 45-degree bevel, and the wider that bevel is to an extent, the less likely you're going to damage the handle and chip pieces of wood off. This principle applies to, tent stakes or any kind of thing that you're going to beat on. Definitely bevel that. So I just want a stronger bevel here. I'm just going to take my 4-way rasp. I've always called it a shoemaker's rasp. That's what my teachers always called it. And whatever it is, it's astoundingly useful. And everyone should have one of these in their basic toolkit. If I was to reduce a toolkit, like basic woodworking toolkit, I mean really basic, like for primitive woodworking, doing stuff in the field, making handles, this would be, in the top 5 tools. Along with a good axe or hatchet, a knife, some kind of saw, and one of these. That would probably be my first 4. Better than a spoke shave because you can use it with one hand. You don't have to fix the work. I mean, this I could fix like this and use a spoke shave on it, but most things you can't. This just happens to have a sharp blade I can stick in the stump. Yeah, so that's fine. Okay, now I was about to grab my Mora knife here, but Mora knives just have super fragile edges. If I hit that edge against this steel, it's going to just trash it. But if I use my Swiss Army knife for this, I don't really care if it gets dull. I could probably sharpen 4 or 5 Swiss Army knives in the time it would take someone to sharpen a Mora knife. And that's just, well, whatever. Mora knives are very delicate. I love the things, but they're extremely delicate. You got to be careful with them. Let's just whack on this first and see if it moves. Granted, I'm not hitting it super hard yet, but it's not going to go on a 1/4 inch. I can tell that already. Nothing. It didn't budge at all. Okay, so I'm either going to use this or I may just go ahead and use the rasp. I need to get some wood off of this area here so that this thing can scoot down a bit. Now I would rather not scoot this down any. I don't want it. I don't want the handle to be shorter, but this sharp edge right here is really vulnerable, and I just think that's unacceptable to me. Put this back on for safety's sake. I can feel myself about to get cut there. Yeah, so see, like with a Swiss Army knife, I'm just banging the edge right into the steel here. You know, I just don't really care. It's so fast to sharpen this thing. I'm a big fan of Swiss Army knives. I'm not saying that they would replace really a good sheath knife or anything like that. But they are incredibly useful, and you know, if you know what you're doing, you can do a lot of work with them. And trust me, I know, because I've been limited to just using a Swiss Army knife in the past quite a bit, just because it would be like what I had or what I could find at the flea market cheap, or you know, maybe found somewhere, and I would get like a nice knife that I like a sheath knife or something, and then end up losing it. In fact, I don't really have a sheath knife right now that I'm crazy about, and usually I'll just have this in my pocket. To hear some people talk, and there's all this whole gearhead scene in the bushcraft and survival communities, it just seems like the gear is an end in itself. And you think that, you know, if you don't have some kind of like fancy tactical bush knife, you know, you're just going to die instantly in the woods or not be able to do anything. Well, check out the knives that, you know, Indians and pioneers used to carry. And I think you would be appalled by today's fancy bush knife standards. They're just garbage, you know. Same goes with the axes too. And I'm all for, if you're going to make a piece of gear or buy something really good, but I'm just saying you can get away with a lot. Okay, yeah, so we've gained over 1/16 of an inch there. This is working. If I can keep hitting that accurately like that. Remember, I'm not trying to get it on as far as I want it. I'm just trying to get it on far enough that we can get a good purchase on the wedges up here and get them out. Yeah. I'm tempted to go with a steel hammer or something here. It's risky, but it would be much more effective. This is it's just a little bit soft. It's pretty heavy, but it lacks the authority of a denser, compact mass of like a steel hammer. We have almost 1/4 inch. I sure would like more. It's really better not to do this. I probably should get a bigger, like a big hammer. Oh yeah, that's helping. Now, if I played this right, I could probably, there we go, now we're talking. I could probably not take this head off at all, but I wanted to do some work on the inside lip here, and I also want to work on the head a bunch, so I just figured it'd be easier if I take the handle off. And really, if I'm going to jump it on this far, like I have already, and a little bit further, I really need to take this wedge out anyway. So I think we're going to go for it and try to get this off. I think just a couple more taps, love taps with this axe. Time to grab a hacksaw and some other tools and get on with this. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to cut off the two sides so I can access this wedge and this wedge. But I'm going to try to actually leave the wooden wedge in the middle for now so I have something to grab onto. This hacksaw is actually kind of a favorite tool of mine. I like to have it in my little, just laying around, and in my little traveling toolkit. I don't know, they're just, these little tiny hacksaws are just super handy. They're great for cutting small hard materials like bone and antler, and just slicing off little bits of wood here and there. I don't know, I just find that I use them a lot. You wouldn't think so, but there it is. This is just a trashy chisel I use for carpentry and stuff. So I don't really care if it gets a little damaged. I may not need to do this, but I'm going to drill that out. There we go. So basically what I'm going to try to do is cut a notch into this and then start pushing it upward using that notch as a grabbing point. Yep, definitely budged a little. I really don't know what I think about these circular wedges. I mean, in theory it seems like a good idea, I guess. Because it spreads the wood in both directions. Gotta use a bigger hammer, I think. And stop hitting myself in the thumb. Let's just see if we can cut a wedge here. Little grabbing grab point. There we go. Yeah, there it goes. I think if I apply too much pressure with these vice grips, it's just going to crush the wood and break, but I'm going to try kind of prying it out against something. There we go, it moved. We got it now. So this will just leave the little piece in the middle that was in the center wedge here. Oh, that's loose too. And I definitely want to get that out. That could, even that little piece could definitely keep this head from coming off. Okay. So this is just a quickly carved out piece of wood that I made for getting another axe handle off. Let me see if I can get it to budge a little. Just whacking it like this. There we go. The thing went like 10 feet. All right, this is very interesting. Look where the axe head was actually touching the wood. It didn't touch anywhere in this entire area. Just a little here, down here, right there. Same on this side, here, here, here. That doesn't work. That's not enough to, hold this thing tight for very long. So we're gonna work on that. A little bit at the back here. Hopefully we can get enough contact area. Now I did jump it on almost a 1/4 inch, so there probably was more contact up here that we're not seeing from before, but not much. Hopefully we can do something about that. Okay, let's take a look at the inside bottom edge here. Okay, so as I said in the handle video, I want to take and round this inside lip right here off so it's not so sharp. And I can feel there's like a little burr here. It's not bad. It's actually not super sharp, but it's definitely not rounded either. The other thing I want to do is taper on the inside with the file like this. Right here the handle ramps up off in this direction, and so I want this ear to slide up on that ramp and continue to seat down rather than jamming into it and catching and freezing up. They're down to about a 1/16 of an inch thick right now, so I'll probably take them down to about a 32nd of an inch. I don't think that they need to be, as long as they're rounded and not sharp, I don't think they need to be particularly thick. Otherwise, this doesn't feel too bad. A lot of times they'll be much sharper or even have like a burr, so that's cool. Well, I'm not really going to do the head today, but while we're here and this is already affixed, I'm going to fix this because the metal's kind of folded back here, and there's a, it's not flat at all. There's a big ridge. You need to take off a bunch of metal there. So for this one, I'm going to start with my dull file on the flat side because this still has scale on it, which is extremely hard, and that will mess up your file too. Scale is like burnt iron, basically. It's extremely hard, and I want to make sure I get any of that off before I move on to my good file, which is going to cut this a lot faster. So really I'm just trying to scrape off the surface here and get past that scale. And I'm not going to get it all off, there's just too much here. Alright, I'm going to call that good. This is my new Baco farmer's file. I'm totally into this file. I'll probably do a review, but I can definitely recommend it as a general purpose file. If you don't own a good file, this is a good all-purpose file. It has a double cut side, which cuts quickly but leaves kind of a coarse surface. It has a bastard file single cut side, which will make a smoother surface, but it's still fairly aggressive. And it has a smooth edge and a toothed edge. So all around, this is just a really good all-purpose file. I'm totally into these. I'll put an Amazon link. I think they're about $15, maybe $18. I don't know. Yeah, you can get one cheaper at the hardware store, but it's going to be garbage. They have a really good reputation, and I'm totally into it. As you can see, this is cutting rather nicely. It's a new file, so I don't want to, this is a good project to break it in because it has a fairly large surface contact going. Worst case scenario is I would start using this on some kind of sharp edge. Well, a sharp edge at a right angle like this, dragging it, you hear that? Listen, hear that? That's the death of file teeth. Okay, so it is slightly canted like this, so I need to bring this edge down a little more. Almost there. What I don't recommend is just going to the hardware store and buying just any old cheap hardware store file. As far as I can tell, they're pretty almost uniformly not very good. Okay, just dress it up a little with the fine side of the file. Now to do these edges, I'm going back to a used file. It's a decent file, but it's not brand new. It's not my precious brand new farmer's file. It's just an old Nicholson. It's a good Nicholson. It's an older file. But I want to round these off just slightly, just to dress them up a little bit. And again, I'm going with the edge rather than this way against it. Hear that? It's fine to come at an angle like this is probably what I should be doing. Either way, just if you don't have to, don't come straight across. It's definitely not good for your file. I don't need to do this. I'm more likely to want these edges rounded than sharp. Let's say if I was hitting, my axe handle like I was earlier to drive the head on, then I definitely would not want these sharp. There's some situations where I might want them sharp if I'm busting something apart, but if I had to, have to make a choice, I definitely want them rounded. So I'm going to do that to all of these. Okay, that's enough on this head for today. We'll get back to that later. But I just wanted to get it to the point where I'm ready to, you know, fit it and drive it on and off. So since I'm modifying the rest of the handle around, you know, where this head is eventually going to be seated, I want to get it, you know, seated as far as I want it. So this is disappointing to me that I'm going to have to drive this on so far, and I still don't think it's going to fit very well. Judging from what I've seen here, I think wedging it really well with a fat wedge might help expand the handle inside of here, but it really isn't touching that much, and that has to be dealt with. So just that little bit of tapering I did on these ears, I can tell already that it worked. I mean, it slid up this lot much more easily. So anyway, I was saying I'm just disappointed that we're going to lose so much handle length, because this is advertised as a 26-inch handle. Is that correct? Yeah, 26-inch. But it's really going to end up being more like 25 inches. And the way this is set up with the size of this eye and the drift that they use, like a drift is, you know, it's a tool that, well, it's like this, but metal, and you make it the exact shape that you want the eye, and you drive it in here and it makes the eye the shape that you want it. So the way they have this set up with the drift that they used on this head, and the way that this handle is set up on the lathe, and the way it came out, it's not a good fit. You know, I'm not an axe manufacturer, but I make a lot of stuff, and, you know, I'm an occasional blacksmith, and I've fitted quite a few handles, and it just seems like they're blowing it. Like this handle design, aside from being all the other complaints I have about it, the eye portion just needs to be able to fit this head, and it really is not. It doesn't fit. That's a problem. So I'm just going to see how far I can drive this on, and then we'll drive it back off and look at where it's touching, but I think we're going to have to drive it on kind of quite a bit further. Yeah, we're actually seeing a little bit of damage here. I'm gonna round that off, bevel this even more. We need to go on quite a bit further, and I think we're just about bottomed out to the point where we're going to have to start modifying this wood to get it on further. In fact, I'm sure of it. For that, going back to the rasp. Oh yes, I said I was going to fix that. I can see on here where I was hitting it with that axe, and I kind of hit it at an angle instead of perfectly flat. It put a little dent in here. You got to be careful. If you hit it perfectly flat, it's relatively safe. But doing that consistently is a little tricky. But I think we'll be moving back to a steel tool here pretty quick. I wouldn't mind getting this on a little bit further. Yeah, I'm gonna have to go to steel. I'm gonna go get a better hammer. This hammer face is a little rounder than I'd like, but you can hear the authority of that versus this wooden mallet. Again, just really trying to hit it nice and square, not tilted at an angle or like this. Just nice and square. If you can do that, it's relatively safe. Okay, so it's almost on as far as I was hoping to get it on, but I don't think it's very tight in here. And again, we may be able to fix that with some shims, and by using a really fat wedge to really wedge this open in the center here, not just at the top, but like in the middle, to get a better fit. I'm just going to drive it on a tiny bit further and then take it off and take a look at it. And we'll be able to see where it's touching. And I've got another 1/4 inch here. We drove it on a 1/4 inch, so we've probably driven it on close to a 1/2 inch further than it came from the factory. And I'm far enough down now that I can get rid of this sharp edge by just basically rasping this and, you know, rounding this wood off now. There's just a little bit of sharp exposed right there. I think that's acceptable. Alright, so we'll just take this off and take a look at it. There we go. Like the right tool for the job. Everyone needs a few vices. When I had a blacksmith shop with my friend Wiley Woods, yes, the Wiley Woods, sure enough, he made a shirt that said everyone needs a few vices, and it had pictures of all different kinds of vices on it. Pretty cool. I wish I still had one of those. Alright, so now I'm going to go ahead and cut this kerf a little bit deeper.